This is the Reluctant Leader podcast, the podcast designed to help you step out of the shadows and become an inspirational leader. I'm your host, Mark Terrell, and each episode I will be getting to grips with a leadership topic by interviewing an expert in their field. I'll be picking their brains for those golden nuggets that will help you be the best you can be. Make sure you don't miss an episode by subscribing at thereluctantleader.co.uk, and please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. So let's get on with the show. Today I'm talking to Paul Holbrook, who left a 20-year career in the City of London in mid-2017. He'd had enough of seeing the toxic effects that managers were having on their people and themselves. In starting his own company, he discovered the reason many people fail to become leaders is that they already think they are leaders. Paul is now dedicating his time to helping others understand what they are doing with their time, and has created the Diary Detox to give them at least a day back in their diary every week. Really enjoyed this chat with Paul, lots of value, and if you are struggling with your time, then I think you're going to learn lots of ways of getting some time back in your diary. So I hope you enjoy, and I will see you on the other side. So hello, Paul. Welcome to the Reluctant Leader podcast.
Sorry, I jumped the gun there. Hello.
That's okay. I like someone that's keen.
I am certainly that.
So thanks for giving up your time to join me today. And we are going to be talking about time management, which is obviously a key skill for anybody in a management leadership position to make sure that they're using their time as efficiently as they can. So as far as you're concerned then, Paul, the first thing I always ask everybody that comes on the podcast is, why do you do what you do? And what was the pivotal moment that made you make the decision to do what you do?
Where did it all begin? What was the moment? So the moment was walking down Bishopsgate in London. I just travelled into work on the train, and it was, oh goodness knows how many, probably the 7,000th or 14,000th trip I'd done like that over 20 years. And as I looked around, the thing is, normally when you walk down the street on the way to work, you're looking at the floor and you're not really thinking about anything. And for some reason that morning, I was looking up and I was looking around, and all I could see were miserable people. And I thought to myself, why are these people so miserable? And it was at that moment that I kind of realized that actually I was one of them. I was really miserable. I didn't want to be in the city anymore. And it had been happening over many years, I later realised, but I hadn't quite twigged until that very moment. So as I looked around, I thought to myself, well, why are people so miserable? And if you think about over the last 20 years when I was in the city, a lot of money has been spent on management and leadership development. And I sat there and thought, well, if this amount of money has been spent on management and leadership, why have we got no more leaders today than we did 20 years ago? And I truly believed that. And I surmised it was because managers just didn't care. They didn't care about their people. And as I walked past these doors of people sharing cigarettes and people having conversations, you just get a snippet of the conversation as you walk past. And they were invariably talking about their crappy managers, and they were invariably talking about how somebody had stabbed them in the back at work. And I just thought, this is terrible. So at that moment, I decided that I was going to lead the city. And given that so much money had been spent on management and leadership, I decided I was going to start my own company, but I was actually going to leave the city. I was going to go and start a leadership consultancy, let's call it. And it was going to be focusing on people who couldn't afford to not be a good leader, and that was small businesses. Mm-hmm. And that's ultimately why I now do what I do. But of course, it's kind of morphed quite a lot since then.
Yes, and I think that's an important thing to remember, is that what we set out to do in the first instance tends to be, as you say, morphed into something quite different because we get more focus on exactly what we want to deliver. And I think your Diary Detox product, that wasn't initially what you started with. Am I right in thinking that?
You are 100% correct, yes. So no, I started off by trying to help people develop their leadership. And there are lots of leadership development companies out there. That wasn't really what it was about. It was about inspiring people to lead, to see the benefits of leadership. Mm-hmm. But as I started to talk to people about that business, I got some really curious responses. And invariably the response would come back, oh, that's really interesting, but I don't have time to talk to you about that. Or I'm too busy to talk to you about that. And I thought, oh, okay, then that's quite an interesting take on it. Right. And then eventually I thought, well, maybe it's the wording I'm using. And so I started talking about leadership development. But people kept saying, yeah, I haven't really got time to talk about leadership. I'm a bit too busy to talk about leadership. And I thought, how can you be too busy to talk about leadership? I mean, that's one of the fundamental qualifications of being a great leader. Having time to talk about leadership. And I didn't have an answer to it. The answer that I had was, well, when you do have time, let me know, I'll be here. And of course, very few of them ever did come back and talk about it. So I thought, well, okay, I'm not sure if this is really true, whether they don't have time or whether or not they're just using it as an excuse. And I remember back to probably around about 10, 11 years into my career. And I went from running a team of 15 up to a division of 350. And that was quite a step up. But at that point, not a week would go by when people wouldn't say to me, I don't have time to do what you're asking me to do. And I had a really simple 2-step process that I would take them through. And so I started using that. When people said, I don't have time to talk to you, I thought, well, how about I give you back some time and then we'll talk? And this seemed to catch people's imagination. They kind of said, what do you mean you're going to give me some time back? How are you going to do that? And over the next 2 months, I got a really interesting insight, into people's diaries, but probably more importantly, into the reasons that people give for the things they have in their diary. And if you remember back to what I said a moment ago, I left the city because I just thought that managers didn't care about leading, and I kind of lost faith, and that's why I left. What I realized over those 2 months of starting to do those two-step process with people was that it wasn't that they didn't care about leadership. I realized that the majority of the things people fill their diaries with, they think are leadership.
Right.
They thought it was leadership. And I sat there and thought, hang on, they think going into back-to-back meetings, working crazy hours, not spending any time with their family and friends, taking on tasks because it's, in quotes, just easier if I do it myself. They honestly thought that was leadership. And I thought, oh my goodness, this is crazy. Well, I can see that's not leadership. How can I get them to see that it's not leadership? Because you can't tell somebody it's not. They have to see it for themselves.
Yeah.
And I added 3 more steps onto the first 2 steps. And that was genesis of the Diary Detox. Right.
Yes. And also I noticed that you use this hashtag, what are you doing? And obviously that resonates with me as well. What are you doing? And I guess the next question is, why are you doing it?
Absolutely. It's interesting because although all of the marketing and like say the hashtag is always talking about time, time isn't really the greatest thing you get back from it. It's that you get a fundamental view and insight into the value of the things that you're doing every day. And it was one day when I went running and I was trying to think about this strap line that I could use for this product. And of course I was just running along and I was thinking to myself, my goodness, you're doing all this stuff and you think it's the right stuff. And then there's this thing there that can help you. And what are you doing? And it was like that was the moment I thought, oh my God, that's it. What are you doing? Because I think when I've ever looked at people who are in a situation where they're not leading or they've got, no time left to do anything of value to them, that sometimes you just look at them and you go, what are you doing? And that's kind of what it was all about. And, depending on where you put the intonation in the sentence, it can be the same thing. What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? So, yeah, it is all about why you're doing it. And as I said, as I got that insight into people's diaries, it showed me very clearly that people thought they were getting value out of the things they were doing every day. Whereas when the feedback I now get indeed, I did a course last Wednesday at Calcott in Tetbury. One of the follow-ups I did afterwards, they turned and said, my God, it's amazing. I went back to work the next day and I was consciously aware of everything that I was doing. And I actually became really respectful of my own time.
Yeah. And that's the key thing, isn't it? It's highlights, I think, one of the, it's a process you go through and you highlight the habits that you've got into, that you've accepted as the norm, as if the things that you should be doing. But when you actually take a step back and look at all this stuff, and look at your diary and think, well, what's in it? Why is it there? And what's it serving? Who's it serving?
Absolutely. And more often than not, it's serving bizarrely, it's serving who you think you need to be. And the thing is, it's not their fault. We're never taught any of this stuff in school. We're not taught it in college. It's an extremely valuable skill to learn how to use your time effectively, but we don't. And the people that we learn it from are the people that we grew up working for, and they weren't taught it either. So this is my attempt to, I suppose, give people a process that allows them to reprogram their automatic and default instinct to just go wherever their diary tells them, or go wherever somebody else says they need them to go. Yeah.
And I think it's such a relevant point with what is our experience when we've been, previous jobs and how we've been taught. I know my background is a family business. I spent a lot of time working with my father, who, unless he saw you doing something, then that's how he judged you on how busy you were, and thinking time and planning time weren't really regarded as proper work. And I come across that a lot with the clients I work with, and it's I think it boils down to the fact of where knowing where you're going and what you're actually trying to achieve. And it's the old adage, working on your business rather than in it. And it's so easy to get sucked into that. Well, I'm going to do that today. And at the end of the day, I'm going to be busy. I go home and I'm going to be tired. And I've done lots of work. But when you actually look at it, are you actually doing the things that you should be doing? And are you falling back into that comfort zone of the things that you know how to do, and you'll feel that you've justified your existence by just the fact that you've been there and you've been busy. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I think when as I mentioned a moment ago, when I turned the 2 steps into 5, the first 2 steps were really about showing somebody what they were doing. The last 3, interestingly, you just said that, were actually more focused on showing you what you should be doing and matching up the 2. And it's incredible when people go through the process, when you show them what they have been doing. And again, it's not me showing them what they're doing. I'm just giving them the tool. They're making all of the decisions. They are assigning they're the one that's assessing the value of what they're doing. And they say, oh my goodness, what have I been doing? And you go, that is what you've been doing. But then once they've done that, it's then this, what should you be doing? And it's sometimes about just looking at the things that's the success criteria of your role. And so showing them what they've been doing is one thing, but then when you show them the difference between what they have been doing and actually what they should be doing, it's amazing how many people will turn around and say, I've never thought of my job this way before. It's like, no, we often don't, because it is an instinct. It's almost like an automatic reaction. We just get caught into doing the stuff that we thought we should, rather than, as you say, taking some time out to think about, what am I really trying to get out of all this? It's amazing when you do that, how much you find you're not doing.
Yes. And it is so easy to skip those steps, and to fall into that. Well, I've got stuff to get on with. I'll just get on with it. And I'll try and look at that another day or tomorrow. But unfortunately, it never comes around, does it? Unless you actually consciously take that step back to do something, like your diary detox is. Well, okay, how is this working for me? And it's so important, but obviously not done enough. People aren't encouraged to do it by their leaders, I suppose. it's almost got to be a culture within a business, is that this is what we do. We look at our diaries, we make sure it's working for us and for the business.
Absolutely. And it is going to start from the very, very top.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about that. It's interesting, actually, because I think just when it comes to things like leadership, we've heard the word leadership and management over so many years. I think people are becoming a bit tired of the word. Yeah. And the thing is, it's kind of happening with time management as well now. Often people will come back to me and they'll say, well, isn't this just time management? And you kind of smile wryly and go, well, not really. I mean, it is, of course, related, and it's ultimately directed at time management. But time management is a set of, I don't know, ideas, proposals, concepts that you could, and the emphasis is on the word could, that you could employ, and if you do, you might get some time back. Mm-hmm. The thing with Diary Detox is that it's a process. It's a 5-step process. Mm-hmm. That if you do it every week, and it takes somewhere between 10 and 30 minutes. For me, it's 10 minutes because I know what it's all about now. But when you start doing it, it's 30 minutes. If you do those 5 steps for up to 30 minutes once a week, you will get back at least a day a week in your diary. You will get it back. Yeah. It's not, you could do this and you might. This is, if you do this, you will. Yeah.
So you've mentioned a couple of things about, the commute and all that stuff, and also going to meetings, maybe meetings that are seen to be a waste of time. So what are the other typical things you see people are spending time doing that they are quite quickly deciding that they can do without?
Well, I've got to say, I mean, the meetings is a significant part of it. It really is. Mm-hmm. But of course, I'm sure nobody will be under any surprise when I say one of the biggest things I see in there is email. Right. I recently did a one-to-one. I do it as a workshop or a one-to-one, and this particular person wanted a one-to-one diary detox. Took about 2 hours, and it's. I chuckle because it's lovely to see that realization. But what they realized was that when they did the first 2 steps, and the colors get turned on in their diary. It showed them that they were spending 2.5 days in email.
Ugh.
2.5 days.
Almost half the day, half the time.
It was half their time in email. Wow. And I still am surprised, but I'm not surprised, but I am surprised that people, when they turn it on, they are so taken aback and they go, that's half of my time. And you go, yeah. Absolutely. And that's not me telling you you're doing it. I just take you through the tool and you make the decisions, and that's what it's telling you. And of course, that is a big drain on time. And there are things that people can do. I actually write a blog as well, and it's not all about Diary Detox. It's about, there's a lot of things you can do to save time, but what I like to focus on are what are the things you can stop doing that are going to save you time. And one of them in a recent blog was around email. There is a much better way to communicate with the world that doesn't require you burying yourself in email all day. It takes a huge amount. If you think about it just right now, if we were to try and summarize the conversation we've just had by writing it down, which is effectively what you do when you create an email, it would take ages to edit it, to make sure that it's coming across in the right way, because you lose all of the intonation in the voice. Yeah. And if you can just go over and talk to somebody, I've always had this mantra. In the first instance, go and speak to somebody. Actually stand up out of your chair and go and speak to them. Even if it means going to the next building, do that.
I was just about to say that. It's surprising how many clients I've come across, which they rely on emails, and they are working in the same building and sometimes in adjoining offices.
Well, I've seen it, but they're actually in the next desk. I mean, that was my biggest experience probably from the city, is that it's almost like you come into the office, you sit down, and it's almost like you're restricting yourself to the only means of communication is going to be whatever's in front of you. And people will sit there for 4, 5, 6 hours. Whereas I was always renowned for, you're never at your desk. It's like, no, I'm talking to people. Yeah. And that is the most efficient way. Even if you include the walk to their desk or the walk between buildings, it's still more efficient than writing an email. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think it's a part of this is about people needing this like audit trail so an email they can check through, and obviously a conversation you can't record, or in most cases you're recording. Do you think that's part of it? People thinking, well, I need to be have something to refer to if this doesn't happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I learned, well, it's certainly, I don't think that's the biggest part of it, but it's certainly a significant part of it. And I fell foul of that very early in my career. I got caught into an email conversation because I thought I want to make sure this is on the record. And at that time I had a mentor, a guy called Ben Whittle. I haven't thought about him for ages, actually, till just then. And one of the most valuable lessons he ever gave me was, he said, look, it's okay to use email to create an audit trail. He said, but why don't you go and have the conversation with the person and then just use the email to confirm what has been agreed. Yeah,
and or just summarise, just to confirm what you just talked about, sort of.
Absolutely, because it's quick. You say, look, as discussed, this is what we've agreed, and that's it. All of the transactional backwards and forwards can happen in person, and quite frankly, nobody really needs to see all of that on the audit trail. They don't need to see how hard it was to make the decision. They just need to know the decision was made. So that's certainly a large part of it. But I think one of the biggest parts of it is it's just our automatic behaviour, and it's exactly the same with time. People today seem to follow their diaries with such reverence. It's almost like, if a meeting comes into my diary, I have to go to it. And it's the same. If somebody sends me an email, I have to reply to it. The number of times I would go up to somebody who was like 2 or 3 desks away and reply in person to the email that they've sent me, and I've gone, "Hello, should we talk about it?" And they go, "Oh, okay then." Yeah, it's me.
You weirdo. Why the hell do you want to talk about it for?
Absolutely.
Yeah, but I mean, it's mad, isn't it? I mean, when you think about it, how a conversation, picking up the phone for a 5-minute conversation can save so much time, because you're waiting for replies, and replies might be missed, and not to mention the time that is wasted when people are copied in when they don't need to be. The amount of emails that I get where I've been copied in for some reason. I'm part of a group and I've got an email that someone's replied to all, and you think, why have they replied to all? It doesn't concern me. You just need to reply to the person that sent it. All that, and obviously it all adds up. But we won't spend too much more time on email, because obviously, we've emphasised that, and I think it's an obvious thing, isn't it? So is there anything else? Is there anything else apart from emails where our listeners can sort of focus what they're doing?
There is. So I suppose I haven't really mentioned it, but I suppose I made reference to it. But the reason the Diary Detox works the way it does is because it gives you a sense not of what you're doing, but of the value of the things that you're doing.
Okay. Yeah.
What's very interesting is the amount of time that is actually spent adding no value. And that can be a variety of things. It could be around travel. So that's quite a significant one, actually, for some of the small business owners that I've been doing this with recently. When you look at how much time they spend traveling or going to meetings that they really don't need to go to, that actually turns out to be quite a lot of wasted time. Yeah. And there actually are ways of making that time useful once you've realised that it's not at the moment. But
yes, I tend to like to take the train, and you can get stuff done on a train as opposed to the driving, which is obviously a waste of time.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, one of the things I do to use my time more efficiently when I'm driving is I will listen to an audiobook.
Right. Yeah.
Because we can all learn things, and one of the key categories that we use within a Diary Detox is the one around improving. And improving isn't just about improving your business or improving others. It's also about improving yourself. And listening to an audiobook. My last one was one called Oversubscribed, which I found fascinating, and I recommended it to lots of people. But if I had not realised that I was using that time for no value, I wouldn't have tried to change it. I wouldn't have listened to that book, and I wouldn't have learned something. But it's not just about that. I mean, what I call floating time. traveling does account for a lot of that, but it's also the stuff that we don't realize we're floating doing. Again, one of the people I followed up with after the Diary Detox on Wednesday, they turned around to me and said, well, it was really bizarre. I've got to tell you a funny story. I went to make a coffee and this person started talking to me, and I realized that they weren't talking to me about anything that I hadn't heard before. And I realized it was complete and utter floating time. And I became really, really protective of my time. I wanted to get back to my desk and carry on working. And it's the most bizarre thing that when somebody tells you that, the previous day that they were spending a reasonable amount of their time floating, and then their realization afterwards is that they don't want to float anymore. They realize they're spending 2 or 3 hours extra per day doing stuff they didn't get done. Yeah. And it's changed their behavior. It's changed their insight as to how they're spending their time. It's quite heartening.
Yes. And I guess it's about that self-awareness, isn't it? Being aware of and having that extra awareness of what time is and how it can.
That is what it's all about. That is it. So when we say the phrase "what are you doing," that is what it's about. It's about showing you what you are really getting out of your time. And at that point, you can choose not to do anything about it. You can choose to be interrupted. You can choose to do something that you think is more important. But what this is about is it's showing you, it's giving you all the information you need to go, is it really more important? And at that point, at least you make the decision consciously rather than automatically.
That's the important thing, is in making conscious decisions around whether this is effective use of my time. And I think from the work I've done, you see people that are particularly good in certain leadership skills. And one of the things, obviously, not to forget is those relationship skills that are so important to get the best out of our team. So obviously we don't want to discourage people not to have discussions, because obviously that leads to better relationships. It's about having the right conversations and making them effective, isn't it?
Absolutely. So one of the things that if someone does a diary detox, one of the extra little bonuses I suppose they get out of it is something called the spot diary detox. And this is the thing that they can use if generally you're somebody who finds it quite hard to say no to people. It's something that you can use within about 15 seconds. And you can use it when you're having a conversation. It's quite right. We don't want to stop people from talking to each other. But what we do want to do is we want to get them to think about where the value in that conversation is really going. And so as and when that conversation starts, the 5 steps of the diary detox, you can go through them in your head really quickly. And if you realize that actually the subject of this conversation isn't really adding any value to you or to them, it is about adding it to both, not just to you, because that would be a very selfish position to take. You can realize quite quickly, like this person did, actually, I'm having this conversation, it's not really adding anything. And what they did is they thought, how can I turn this into an amber or a green conversation? These are color coding for diary detox. And they actually took the conversation around to something different that was more about developing that person rather than just talking about the weather or rather than just talking about something that was going on over the weekend. So it is, again, about making conscious decisions about what you do with your time, but also even when you're headlong into having made that decision to do something, there's always a way to get more out of that bit of time that you're taking out of your precious workload.
Yes, yeah. And it's interesting because my work, as you know, I use motivational maps, and a lot of people that come to work are actually very much what we call friend orientated. So they come to work for connections, and what they need, part of what they want from their leader, their manager, is actually just to check in with them so that they actually feel as if they're a person. And sometimes using that conversation just to check in with someone at even before the weekend or after weekend, just to say, well, how was your weekend? And lead in a leadership position, you need to be aware of that so that you do have that quick check-in. How was your weekend? How did you, you said you were going skiing. How was it? That sort of stuff can actually be really productive because it actually motivates people. So it's about knowing why you're doing something. So Absolutely. If you know that the person you're managing is highly motivated by a feeling of belonging, your time can be used really effectively by spending that little bit of time checking in with them and finding out what they were doing at the weekend. It's not wasted time. It's actually productive for both of you. So.
Absolutely. And for me, that kind of conversation is what we would call a monitoring conversation. It would be an amber conversation, or an amber activity. And amber activities are those things that can make the difference as long as you do them, but don't spend all of your time doing them. Whereas your green stuff is this is the stuff that's going to really add extra value, and you should spend as much of your time doing that. So it's also kind of, as soon as you categorize something as an amber conversation, you say, okay, this is a good conversation to have. It's necessary to make sure make sure is a key phrase, review, make sure, understand. But if you start doing that all of the time, it starts to eat in quite significantly, and it's probably indicative of other issues if you're having to spend all your time doing the amber stuff. It's all about conscious use of time and understanding the value you're getting from it. Absolutely.
Yes. And I'm conscious now that we spend a lot of time talking about the negatives, and you mentioned about the green stuff. What sort of are the green things that people should be doing, and making sure they've got plenty of it in their diary?
Well, perhaps if I just put it into context, I think everything that we do in work every day can be broken down to one of 7 categories. And one of them is the floating, the kind of wasting, not adding value. One of them is doing, it's quite transactional stuff, and that's red behaviors. It does make it bad, but you don't want to have too much in there as a leader. 2 of those categories, monitoring and directing, are what I would call amber behavior. Those are the things that will make sure things stay the same, things stay stable, and you know what's going on, and you're aware of what's going on in the environment. But ultimately, the biggest one is the green one, and green is what gives you growth. Green is what I call leading behavior, whereas amber is what you call managing behavior. And when we're leading, it's all about making things better. It's all about improvement. And if you try and differentiate between people who do managing behavior, I don't want to confuse it with management, because hopefully all managers would do some element of leading. But if you separate managing from leading, there are 3 things that leading people do that sets them apart. One of which is spend time thinking. And it's an incredibly underdone thing. If you talk to people and you say, okay, how often do you actually just take time out to think about opportunities, challenges that are going on right now, how you're going to overcome obstacles, the future, a future strategy, a vision, who you are, anything like that? It's amazing how few people actually do it. They will convince themselves that they are, because invariably when something goes wrong, they'll say, oh, well, I was thinking about how I could get around it. Yeah, that's reacting. That's not really thinking. Thinking is something you do that you're not forced to do. You're doing it because it's the right thing to do, not because you have to do it. The thinking is a big part of it. Once you've done your thinking, you then move on to communicating. It's about communicating what you've thought about. And that could be about meeting new people. It could be about sharing new ideas, either from them or from yourself. It could be networking within or outside your organization. It could be buying somebody into a new initiative that you've thought about. And then once you've done that, once you've thought about something, once you've communicated it to someone, there's only one thing left to do. And that's actually to do it. And that's what you call improving behavior. So actually going and making the decision, implementing the new process, doing some training for yourself, sending your people on training, improving your business, how it works, what it does, who it does it with. And that can even be improving your customers' lives. Those are essentially the 3 things. And when people categorize their time within Diary Detox, they're given the opportunity to decide how much of their time they actually spend thinking, communicating, and improving. And it's a real shame how little of that there really is. A lot of it tends to be doing, which is where your emails come in, writing the document, etc. Quite a lot of floating coming in, and surprisingly not enough managing. Very little time is spent just finding out if things are just okay. So yeah, those are the more positive things that you can do if you want to get that growth. And if you don't do those things, you just simply will not grow. You'll go backwards. Yeah.
That's fantastic. And I'm sure all listeners will be thinking about those 7 things, how they're doing them at the moment. And you know, those last 3 things you talk about, the things that, like you say, grow us into, you know, a better leader, a better manager, or whatever. they're the things that are so important and so often get missed when we haven't got time. So the first thing you've got to do is obviously create some time. And we all know how to do that now, don't we? Well, we know we've got a better idea how to do that. So this is a fascinating subject, and I can talk about it all day, but sadly, we need to sort of sum things up a bit. So I'm going to sort of finish off with just the question really that's going to matter to those listening is to what 3 things can every reluctant leader do to manage their time more effectively?
Well, I suppose it's not going to be any shock that probably the first thing I would say is know what you are doing right now, every day. That would be the first thing. And not just know what you're doing, know the value that you're bringing from those things that you're doing every day. That's number 1. I would say number 2 is know and be abundantly aware of what you should be doing, of what is going to make the difference. What are those things that if you got to the end of the year and you're having a chat with the person that you are most accountable to, be it your life partner, be it your boss, be it the board, be it the shareholders, whomever, if you were going to have that conversation with them at the end of the year and say, I have just smashed this year, what are the things that you would want to be able to say that you had done? And those are the things you should be doing. And they may not be the same as the things that you are doing. So there's know what you're doing, there's know what you should do and should be doing. I think the last one is to know when to say no. It's to start to respect your time. People are very disrespectful of your time. It's usually because you're not that respectful of it yourself. So as soon as you start to respect your time, others will start to respect it as well. And finding an approach that will disrupt that automatic, okay, I'll help you, whilst completely neglecting everything else that you should be doing, that could actually damage you and also could actually damage those people who you are just blindly agreeing to help. Mm-hmm. There's always a better way. So know what you're doing, know what you should be doing, and know when to say no. And I don't mean in a negative way. No,
Paul, that's brilliant advice. And I'm sure everyone listening will do those 3 things. Well, I hope they will do anyway, because it's going to make a massive difference to their role. And it's about consciously making different things happen. And if we carry on doing the same things all the time, then we can only expect the same results. So thank you very much for your time today. I hope we maybe can continue this conversation another time. But for now, Paul, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening today. As action leads to outcomes, make sure you make a note to start, stop, or continue doing whatever struck a chord in this episode. Don't forget to subscribe at thereluctantleader.co.uk, where you'll find links to all the past episodes, vlogs, blogs, and how you can get in touch with me. Until next time, bye for now.